G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jasmine and I really love to teach the Word of God. So thanks so much for tuning in. This channel really is about teaching the Word of God in all sorts of different topics, but I do also like to have a focus on women's topics, women-related topics. So if that's your vibe, then please like and subscribe and follow along on this journey. Now, at times you'll probably see my husband on here as well, Caleb. Some of you might already know him. He is from the I Think Biblically channel. So if you haven't heard of it, or you want to check out more, then I'll leave a link to his channel below. But in today's video, you've probably seen the title already. We're going to be talking about whether women are more easily deceived than men. So let's get right into this video. So many of us know already that in Genesis chapter 3, it was Eve that was deceived by the serpent and ate of the forbidden fruit, and because of her sin entered the world. But does this mean that women are more easily deceived than men? In 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 12 to 13, it says, "But I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. For it was Adam who was first formed, and then Eve. It was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into trespass." Now, some people take this passage and try to argue that not only was Eve deceived, but women in general are more easily deceived than men. But I don't actually believe this, and I think that they're wrong. But before I give you my interpretation of this passage and how I understand this passage, I first want to show you a number of examples in the Bible where men were actually deceived by women. So let's go and have a look at the first one. So the first example is in the book of Judges, and it's the story of Samson and Delilah, where in Judges chapter 16, verses 15 to 22, we read that Delilah deceived Samson into telling her the secret to his strength. And basically he was captured by the Philistines and eventually had his eyes gouged out. In Judges chapter 16, verse 21, it says, "Then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison." So here imagine the strongest man in the Bible, the strongest man fell into deception because of a woman and lost his strength and became weak. Now, the next example is also found in the book of Judges, and it's the story of Jael and Sisera. Now, in Judges chapter 4, verses 18 to 21, we read that Jael deceives Sisera into taking refuge, taking shelter into her tent, but basically she decides that she wants to kill him, and drives a tent peg straight through his temple with a hammer. In Judges chapter 4, verses 18 to 21, it says, "And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, 'Turn aside, my master, turn aside to me. Do not be afraid.' And he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. Then he said to her, 'Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty.' So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink. And then she covered him, and he said to her, 'Stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and asks of you and says, "Is there a man here?" then you shall say, "No." Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and placed a hammer in her hand and went secretly to him and drove the peg into his temple. And it went through into the ground, for he was sound asleep and exhausted, so he died." Imagine taking refuge into this woman's tent, thinking that she's going to protect you, only to have her kill you. If you think you're more cunning than a woman, then perhaps you're in danger of being deceived by one. The book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes warn men not to fall into the deception of women, and even Moses warned the Israelites about the Canaanite women. The next example is the story of how Lot's daughters deceived their father. In Genesis chapter 19, verses 31 to 38, Lot's daughters thought that the whole world had been destroyed and that they were basically the only ones left, so they deceived their father into having sex with them so that they could go on and have children. So in Genesis chapter 19, verse 31 to 32, it says, "Then the firstborn said to the younger, 'Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may preserve our seed through our father.'" So here we see another example of how a man is easily deceived by a woman or by women. The next example is the story of Tamar and Judah, which is found in Genesis chapter 38. And we read about how Tamar deceives her father-in-law Judah because he refuses to give his son to her in marriage so that she could go on to have children. So we read about her, dressing up as a prostitute, and basically, they end up sleeping together, and, Judah gets deceived. So another example of a man falling into deception because of a woman. The next example is the story of Rebekah and Jacob deceiving Isaac. And this story is found in Genesis chapter 27, where Rebekah shows Jacob what he needs to do in order to basically deceive Isaac, deceive his father, so that he could get the blessing and not his brother Esau. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 15 to 17, it says, "Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her eldest son, which were with her in the house, and she put them on Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. She also gave the savoury dish and the bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Jacob." So here we see that Jacob goes on to deceive his father Isaac so that he could get the blessing from him. But really it's Rebekah that is working behind the scenes to make it all happen. So it's another example of a man being deceived by a woman. Another example of a man who was deceived by a woman is Saul. Now, Saul was deceived by his own daughter, Michal. Now, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, but I'm just going to pronounce it like that for the purpose of this video. But basically, she helped David escape so that he could get away from the soldiers that were after him. In 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 17, it says, "So Saul said to Michal, 'Why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped?' And Michal said to Saul, 'He said to me, let me go. Why should I put you to death?'" Now Michal deceived Saul twice, once when she helped David escape, and then another time she tried to convince Saul that she didn't help him at all. Now my last story that I have for you is the story of Laban and Leah and how they deceived Jacob. Now most of us will know that Jacob was in love with Rachel. He was willing to work 7 years for her, and on the wedding night he thought he was having Rachel, but it ended up being Leah. In Genesis chapter 9 verse 25 it says, "Now it happened in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, 'What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?'" So here we see that Laban deceives Jacob on his wedding night. And really, Leah had a part to play in this deception as well. So there are many stories in the Bible, many examples of where I think men are the ones that are more easily deceived. And they're more easily deceived, obviously, by women. So how do I interpret this passage in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13? Well, I don't think Paul is saying that all women are easily deceived, but I do think that he is saying that because Eve was deceived, that all women have been subjected to the rule of man. Now, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain and conception. In pain you will bear children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." I hope you've liked this video and have found it interesting and informative. I'd love to know your thoughts, so please do leave me a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts. I love to read your comments, and you'll see me in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.